Thanks to Idea Factory International for giving me a review code for this game. For most people outside of Japan, Mado Monogatari, Fia and the Wondrous School, is the newest game from Compile Heart, the creators of the Neptunia franchise. For a few of us, though, this game is our Half-Life 3. The Mado Monogatari series has quite a unique legacy. It was a series of dungeon crawlers that starred a character named Arl Nadja, and featured her yellow pet Carbuncle. If you think this sounds familiar, then you're right. Arl Nadja is also the main character of the Puyo Puyo series. The first 4 Puyo Puyo games, and all spin-offs before Sega, take a lot of elements from Mado Monogatari. Almost all the characters are from Mado, as well as a lot of the music. But, the company who made Mado and Puyo, Compile, eventually filed for bankruptcy. Sega ended up getting the rights to Puyo Puyo and its characters, and they seemed dead set on keeping it exclusively a puzzle game series. And so, Mado seemed to fade away outside of the odd re-release and its presence in the Puyo series. But, Compile chugged along. The creator of Mado Monogatari and Puyo, Matsumitsu Mitami, made the company Compile Heart to succeed it, and they eventually struck gold with the Neptunia series. But, in 2023, Compile Heart announced that they'd made a deal with Sega. There would be a new Mado Monogatari game, and it would include Puyo Puyo characters. This was an impossible game. I don't think anybody thought a new Mado Monogatari with the Puyo cast was a possibility, but here it is. So, for the record, the fact this game even exists is an accomplishment. It coming overseas is also huge. We haven't had one overseas, save for a spiritual successor from 10 years ago. But, legacy can only carry a game so far. Is Mado Monogatari Fia worth the hype? Well, if you read the title to my video, then you probably know my answer. Normally, people talk about story first in these types of reviews. But, I'm gonna save that for last for reasons you'll see. So, presentation. The graphics are good. Not amazing, but good. Each environment's got some little details here and there, and the different dungeons in the game all have cool designs. But, the 2D art style, that's where the presentation shines. Rather than the more blocky designs of modern Puyo, this game harkens back to the classic Mado designs. It's so cool to see Carbuncle looking like this again. But, the new character designs are also cool. They're not all winners, but the vast majority of them are, especially from the main cast. Look at Fia's dorky little hat. That's adorable. Audio is actually a weird point in this game. The main story is fully voiced, which is cool. But, for some reason, most of the gameplay voice clips sound really muffled and compressed. I played on a PS5, so I doubt this was a storage issue. This wasn't a game breaker, it was just kind of odd. Where I was left more disappointed was the music. Mado Monogatari had some really good music. This game has some fine tracks, but aside from the main theme, there's nothing that really stands out. Then there's gameplay. I realized coming in that I might have bit off more than I can chew. Why? Because I do not like mystery dungeon games, and this is a mystery dungeon game. Random enemies, randomized treasure, and exits that spawn in different places. I like designed challenges, so I normally don't like these types of games. But I did like the gameplay. I didn't love it, but it kept me engaged. Okay, so, random enemies. In most of these types of games, I don't understand why you'd ever need combat if you can just walk around. Here, combat happens in an action RPG setting. It's not super deep, but there is some dynamic gameplay in how you move around and how you time attacks. It ends up being pretty fun, especially against bosses. Next, randomized treasure. This game makes use of a crafting system, so you actually do have agency over the treasure you find, and you have to choose how to allocate what you find. I liked that, and keeping up with upgrades helped me with bosses. And then, randomized exits. So, towards the end of the game, I did find myself avoiding combat, but that kind of felt intentional in a way. You want to conserve MP for needed fights, and you've also got a stamina meter for dungeon actions that plays into curry. It's almost like a stealth game. I think I still would have preferred something that incentivized fighting more, but it was still fun. So, basic dungeon gameplay is good. I didn't think it was great, but I was never going to love a mystery dungeon setup. And then the game kinda goes 50 feet long, 1 foot deep. There's a cooking system for making different types of curry with stat boosters for dungeons. There's a farming system to make ingredients to cook with. There's a fruit system to get health items. There's the aforementioned crafting system. There's weapon proficiency and weapon types. There's fishing for some reason. There's an entire festival system attached to the school I barely touched. This game throws a lot of things at the wall, and none of them go that far. But I actually liked this. You don't have to engage with all the game's systems to have fun. Again, I almost never touched the festival system. But I did go deep into the crafting system. It kind of plays into the school setting, where you're branching out and trying a ton of different things. But it's also one of the reasons why I think a sequel for this game could be cool. There's a base for a lot of mechanics, so now there's room to expand on each of them. So, that's overall gameplay and presentation. The game might sound good so far, but not great. That's where the story comes in. The main core of the new Mado Monogatari is the fact that the game takes place at an academy for mages. When you're introduced to Fia, she almost doesn't get into the school because she was late to the entrance exam. She's bummed out at first, but instantly resolves to simply try again the year after. That immediately made me like her. She accepted her mistake and was ready to move on. But the kind principal lets her in, as going to the school on foot is how things happened in the old days. Then we meet the other characters. We meet a kid who's obsessed with being a hero and is detached from reality, and a smart girl who seems to think she's better than everyone else. Them and Fia end up almost getting expelled because of a carbuncle mishap, and the stern vice principal seems out to get them and is overall kinda grouchy. At the start of the game, I didn't like half the cast. And the crazy thing is, that was intentional. When you go to a school for the first time, you're naturally on guard. You don't know how people act, so your initial view of someone is probably one-dimensional. I've met people I thought I'd be friends with who I ended up not liking. I've also had the opposite experience, where people I originally couldn't stand ended up becoming my friends. This is what this game's story does so well. You're put into the same shoes as Fia, and you're judging everyone based on their first meetings. Most video games try to set a good first impression with their characters so you'll like them immediately. In one of my favorite games, Fire Emblem Sacred Stones, Ephraim storms a castle with 3 other guys because he doesn't pick battles, he can't win. Most of us are introduced to games introducing characters like this. But Mado doesn't do this. You learn about everyone bit by bit, and it really works. The stakes of this game start very low and stay fairly low. This is to the game's benefit. Instead of saving the world, you're usually either taking a test or helping your friend. It's through these initial classes that you get to know the other students better. It's through conversations that Fia slowly starts to warm up to her fellow students. It's hard to show and explain, but it happens fairly seamlessly. Throughout the game, the way the group talks to each other slowly becomes more casual. I started out kind of hating the other classmates, but by the end of the game, I loved them all together. The chapters are based around different characters, which helps them develop. For example, in Chapter 2, we learn that Will, the hero boy, has a twin brother who's a professor at the school. He antagonizes the class and is emotionally cold towards his brother, and that's just the right level of drama for a good story. All of the chapters in the game have some sort of emotional pull like this, and it helps to tie everything together while also leading to some real emotional weight. But I've talked about how the characters grow on you, so why don't I give an example? I don't want to spoil too much, so I'll just delve into one character as an example of how the cast develops. Will seems to think he's the main character, is loud and obnoxious, and doesn't seem to grasp reality. That's your first impression of him. But he ended up becoming my favorite. While everyone else has their own problems and self-doubts, Will is already living his best life and truly appreciates his friends. I loved this scene where he stands up for Fia and says what happened was his fault. He's doing this because he truly believes it, and he doesn't feel guilty about it either. He's simply doing the right thing because he knows it's right. There's also another twist. Will is really smart and talented. He's great in combat and does well in school. I feel like a standard trope would be to make him a hero in a mage's world because he isn't smart enough to do magic. But he doesn't follow that trope. Instead, his best traits, his loyalty, his kindness, and his bravery all stem from this desire to be a hero. He isn't annoying because he wants to be a hero, he is his best self because he wants to be a hero. And he's probably the character who develops the least because at his core, he doesn't need to learn much. Every character grows on you in the same way, but why they grow on you is for different reasons. Lena's intelligence ended up playing a key role throughout the game. Todo helps ground the team with more emotional moments. Eska brings in a unique perspective from being a dragon. And Fia is sort of a unifier between everyone. She works well as a main protagonist because she's enthusiastic, but not annoyingly so. She doesn't want to be friends with her classmates at first because she thinks they're all weird. But as she becomes friends with them, that's when she opens up. Her infectious love of life is the heart of the party, and you can really buy her as the leader of the team. Now, I think learning to love the characters would be enough for a good story. But this isn't a good story. It's a great story. This game has a lot of intriguing mysteries that keep you playing along. It's clear that a lot of the teachers have something to hide, and these mysteries slowly unravel as the game goes on. Fia mentions her grandmother, and the staff take great interest. Is Arl her grandmother? Is that why Carbuncle found her? It's never explicitly said, but it's a cool mystery. This great mage called Suji Too Cool, very Puyo-style name, is mentioned often, along with their various escapades, but Fia has no idea who this is. Todo, one of the students you meet, is implied to have something more to him beyond what meets the eyes. There's also mentions of a Demon King. There's a lot of these plot threads throughout the game. A lot get answered, but if you don't, the world is still open to explore. The tone of the game manages to be light and comedic, but also throws in its fair share of emotional moments. It feels reminiscent of the modern Puyo stories, but carves its own identity with the school and its cast. The students get to go have fun at a festival together. They go on adventures to find a mythical treasure, and they study with each other for tests. Side quests can either be a lesson to learn new magic, or a zany request from outsiders that helps to flesh out the world. Fia's having a blast at school hanging out with her new friends, and I was having that same amount of joy reading the story. You might have noticed, I went this long without mentioning something story-wise. How does the game use the Puyo characters? It seems like besides Carbuncle, they aren't really the main characters, and that's correct. Instead, the Puyo characters often serve as bosses, and when they show up, it's treated as a special event. Suke Todora is probably the best example. He gets to do his dance routine and has the same voice actor from the Puyo Puyo games.
Huh? Let's dancing!
なんで私たち黙って見てるの?
The kids are, understandably, very shocked by a giant talking dancing fish. But he gets to have his fun personality while also serving as a cool boss. He's an important part of the chapter he's in, but he's not the main focus. I think that's fantastic. The Puyo characters aren't glorified cameos. They have a role to fill. But they aren't crutches either. The game is better for having Puyo characters in it, but it doesn't need them to succeed. The biggest compliment I can give this game is that I would still play a sequel, even without the Puyo characters. That being said, I still geeked out so much. Momo goes from being a basic enemy in Puyo Puyo Su to a super charming shopkeeper who ends up becoming a familiar sight through dungeons. Skeleton T gets his real first appearance since Puyo Puyo 7, and he's still his same tea-loving self. The characters are all compile era, so you get a lot of deep cuts. There's a character at the end that appears that made me cheer. I'll keep him unspoiled, but if you're a Puyo fan, then I think you'll be happy. Lastly, for the story, I wanted to talk about how gameplay and storytelling intersect in specific ways. First, the game's pacing. Between each chapter, you do classes at the school and explore around, which is where all the side content is. This ends up feeling like an actual school year. You've got the main story as the sort of important tests, and then the side missions as day-to-day life. The side quests help give you more time with each character, and do more to naturally build up the characters' relationships. It also means the game lends itself nicely to being played in chunks. Knock out a mission or two, then play again later. That being said, I wish the side quests were paced a bit better. You get a lot of them at once at the start of each chapter, so I kinda felt compelled to do everything at once. I wish it was more like you got one or two between each sub-chapter. That would have been nicer. With the main quest and a lot of the side quests, I got about 19 hours of playtime. I still have more to do in the post-game, and there's some side content I didn't touch. And then there's this one thing. This isn't the first game to do it, but I think it's quite cool. The game lets you control 5 party members, with 3 at once and 2 in your reserves as you explore through dungeons. That's standard. What's slightly less standard is that at a few points in the story, certain party members will leave and be inaccessible for parts of the game. This is a very bold swing that I ended up appreciating immensely, and it eventually built up to something super dramatic at the end of the game. And with that, I think I've said everything I wanted to say about the game, so now for the conclusion. I went into Mado Monogatari wanting a good game with Puyo characters. Technically, I got that, but not really, because what I got was better. Sure, the gameplay is just good and not great, and there's a few pacing issues. But the game's world with all its mysteries, its charming characters who grow on you throughout the story, its coziness through the setting of the school, its lighthearted tone with the capacity for emotional moments, all of this really elevated Mado Monogatari for me. Yes, the Puyo characters are cool to see, and definitely a draw for Puyo fans, but they aren't the only draw. If you're a Puyo fan, then of course I recommend this game. I love the game's new characters in addition to the old ones, and do hope they can make it into the mainline Puyo Puyo games one day. But, here's a funny one. If you're a teacher, I also recommend this game. I work as a part-time chess teacher for elementary school students. I've seen kids go through the same friendship cycle that Fia and her friends go through in this game, which is why I think the story resonated with me so much. If you're a teacher, then I think you'll resonate with the students as much as I did. But, what if you're neither a Puyo fan or a teacher? Well, if you're looking for a game with a great story and characters, then I think Mado Monogatari is a fine game to pick up. I had a lovely time with this game, and hope that the series will continue on.